Sergeant Jake Morrison had always believed that a clean workspace was a happy workspace. This philosophy had served him well through 3 years of maintaining everything from atmospheric processors to quantum flux capacitors on Outpost Kepler-7. What it had not prepared him for was waking up at 300 hours to find someone had apparently been using the communal armory as a personal dumping ground. "Well, that's just fantastic," he muttered, stepping over what looked like a piece of armor that had seen better days. Several better days, possibly several better decades. The bioluminescent strips along the ceiling cast an eerie blue glow over the scattered equipment. Jake's trained eye immediately cataloged the damage. Scorch marks that went deep into the metal, stress fractures spiderwebbing across what appeared to be chest plating, and a smell that reminded him uncomfortably of his sister's cooking experiments back on Terra Nova. In the center of the chaos lay its owner. The Zephyrian warrior was curled up on a maintenance bench, using her own helmet as a pillow. Her elongated ears, easily twice the length of human ears and tapering to delicate points, twitched occasionally in sleep. Even unconscious, she maintained the rigid posture of someone who'd been trained never to fully relax. Jake had seen her around the outpost before, always walking with purpose, always surrounded by that invisible bubble of authority that career soldiers wore like a second skin. "Arya," he whispered to the outpost's AI system, "what's the story here?" Warrior Keitha Velthari returned from a 72-hour reconnaissance mission approximately 4 hours ago, came Arya's cheerfully efficient response. "Preliminary scans indicate she has consumed nothing but field rations and stimulants for the duration. Her equipment shows signs of extensive combat with Vex bioforms." Jake winced. The Vex were nasty customers on the best of days, insectoid nightmares that could chew through standard armor plating like it was made of chocolate. No wonder her gear looked like it had been through a blender. "Has she eaten anything since getting back?" "Negative. She proceeded directly to equipment storage and has remained here since." That settled it. Jake had grown up in a family where taking care of people was as natural as breathing. His mother had fed half the colony at one point or another, and his father had spent weekends fixing neighbors' equipment for free. The fact that this particular neighbor happened to be a 7-foot-tall alien warrior who could probably bench press a shuttle didn't change the basic equation. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work. The Zephyrian armor was unlike anything in the human arsenal. Where human military gear was all angles and composite materials, this seemed almost alive. The metal had a subtle grain to it like wood, and when Jake ran his fingers over it, he could swear it was warm. Not just warm from body heat, genuinely warm as if something was flowing through it. "Interesting," he murmured, breaking out his molecular cleaning kit. The nano-scrubbers were top-of-the-line human tech, designed to work on any known material. He'd never tried them on living metal before. The first pass with the scrubbers revealed something unexpected. As the combat grime and Vex ichor came away, the armor began to gleam with an inner light. Not the harsh reflection of polished steel, but something softer, more organic. The stress fractures that had looked so severe turned out to be mostly surface damage. A few applications of the micro-repair gel had them closing up like healing wounds. "Well, I'll be damned," Jake said, holding up a piece of arm plating. The metal seemed to pulse gently in his hands as if responding to his touch. Hours passed. Jake lost himself in the rhythm of the work, the way he always did. Clean, inspect, repair, polish. It was meditative almost. The Zephyrian equipment responded to his tools better than it had any right to. Where human gear would resist certain treatments, this seemed to welcome them. The biometal actually helped guide the repair processes, showing him where problems lay. By the time he finished, the first rays of artificial dawn were beginning to cycle through the outpost's lighting system. Keitha's armor hung on the maintenance rack like a suit of liquid mercury, every piece perfectly aligned and gleaming. Her weapons, some kind of energy rifle and a pair of curved blades, sat cleaned and calibrated on the nearby workbench. Jake stepped back to admire his handiwork, wiping his hands on a cleaning cloth. Not bad for a night's work. That's when he noticed the silence. The gentle background hum of the outpost systems continued, but something else had stopped. He turned around to find Keitha sitting bolt upright on the bench, staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite parse. Her normally pale skin had taken on a distinctly purple tinge, particularly around those pointed ears. Jake said brilliantly, "Good morning." Keitha's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. When she finally found her voice, it came out as barely a whisper. "What have you done?" Jake glanced back at the armor, suddenly worried he'd made some catastrophic mistake. Everything looked perfect to him, but maybe Zephyrian equipment wasn't supposed to be that shiny. "I cleaned your gear, ran some basic repairs. Nothing major, just." "You touched it." Her voice was still that same stunned whisper, but now there was something else in it. Something that made Jake's stomach do interesting acrobatics. "Well, yeah. I mean, I had to touch it to clean it. That's generally how cleaning works." He was going for light and humorous, but Keitha's expression wasn't changing. If anything, she was looking more shell-shocked by the second. She stood up slowly, as if testing whether her legs would support her, and walked over to the armor rack. Her fingers hovered over the chest plate without quite touching it. "It recognizes you," she said, and now her voice was full of wonder. "Recognizes me. It's armor, not a pet. Living metal bonds with its wearer's genetic signature. It knows who belongs to it and who doesn't. It should have rejected your touch, burned you, or simply refused to respond to your tools." She finally touched the armor, and Jake could swear he saw it pulse brighter for just a moment. Instead, it welcomed you. Jake was starting to get the feeling he'd wandered into something bigger than a simple maintenance job. "Is that bad?" Keitha turned to look at him, and those large, dark eyes held something that might have been panic. "Do you know what that means?" "That I'm really good with tools." A strangled sound escaped her throat that might have been laughter, or might have been despair. "Jake Morrison of Terra Nova," she said, and the formal tone made him straighten unconsciously. "What you have done is not simply maintenance." "Okay," Jake said carefully, "what is it then?" But before she could answer, the armory door hissed open, and 3 other Zephyrian warriors walked in. They took one look at the gleaming armor, then at Jake, then at Keitha's purple-flushed face, and immediately began talking in rapid, musical syllables that Jake's universal translator couldn't keep up with. One of them, a massive male with scars across his neck, looked at Jake with something approaching awe and bowed his head. "Honor to witness," he said in heavily accented standard. "Witness what?" Jake asked, but the warriors were already backing out of the room, still bowing. Keitha sank back down onto the bench, put her head in her hands, and began what sounded suspiciously like swearing in her native language. "So," Jake said after a moment, "I'm guessing I should have asked permission first." The mess hall at 800 hours was usually a symphony of controlled chaos. Today, it resembled a nature documentary where the predators had suddenly decided to observe the herbivores with scientific fascination. Jake sat at his usual table with his usual breakfast of synthetic eggs and recycled coffee, trying very hard to ignore the fact that approximately 30 pairs of alien eyes were tracking his every movement. "Arya," he muttered into his comm unit, "why does everyone keep staring at me like I've grown a second head?" Based on overnight chatter analysis, news of your interaction with warrior Keitha has spread through the Zephyrian contingent. Current speculation ranges from you being a prophesied figure to you having accidentally declared war on their homeworld. Jake nearly choked on his coffee. "Come again." "The Zephyrians appear to be having difficulty categorizing your actions within their cultural framework. Several have requested access to their homeworld's historical archives." Before Jake could process this information fully, someone slid into the seat across from him. He looked up to find Keitha, now dressed in standard-issue fatigues that somehow managed to look ceremonial on her. Her ears were no longer purple, but they kept twitching in a way that suggested barely contained agitation. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "Good morning to you too. Sleep well." "I didn't, thanks for asking. Kept having dreams about armor that wanted to adopt me." A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth despite her obvious tension. "Your human humor is refreshing. Most warriors would be demanding satisfaction by now." "Satisfaction for what? I cleaned your gear. Where I come from, that's called being neighborly." "Where you come from," Keitha said carefully. "Touching another person's armor probably doesn't result in a genetic compatibility scan." Jake's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "A what now?" "Living metal doesn't just bond with anyone, Jake. It's grown from the warrior's own genetic material, cultured in the crystal caves of Zephyr Prime. When it accepts a foreign touch, it means—" She paused, searching for words. "It means the metal has found someone genetically compatible with its original host. So you're saying your armor thinks we'd make a good team?" "I'm saying my armor thinks we'd make good mates." The fork clattered onto Jake's tray. Around them, conversations had notably quieted, though he suspected that had more to do with enhanced alien hearing than coincidence. "Mates," Jake repeated slowly, "as in life-bonded partners. In Zephyrian culture, when a warrior's armor accepts another's touch, it's considered a sign from the ancestors that they've found their perfect match." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "There are entire religious ceremonies built around this concept. Poets write epic verses about it. Young warriors dream of the day their armor will sing for someone." Jake stared at her. "And here I thought I was just being helpful. The most helpful thing you could do right now is tell me you have absolutely no interest in Zephyrian bonding customs, so I can report back to my superiors that this was all a misunderstanding." "Well," Jake said, then stopped. The honest answer was that he'd found himself thinking about Keitha more than was probably appropriate for someone he'd barely had a conversation with. She was intelligent, dedicated, and had a dry sense of humor that matched his own. The fact that she was also beautiful in an otherworldly way hadn't escaped his notice. "That's complicated." Keitha's ears went flat against her head. "Complicated how?" "Complicated in that I can't honestly say I have no interest." The mess hall went completely silent. Even the recycling units seemed to pause their eternal humming. Keitha stared at him with an expression that cycled rapidly through surprise, panic, and something that might have been hope. "You can't be serious," she said finally. "Why not? You're brilliant, you're brave. You've got a job that actually matters, and you haven't once made fun of my tendency to fix things compulsively. Plus, you smell like jasmine and ozone, which is oddly appealing." "I smell like what?" "Jasmine and ozone. It's your natural scent. Very nice, actually. Much better than most humans who generally smell like whatever they had for lunch." A strange sound escaped from Keitha's throat. It took Jake a moment to realize she was laughing. "You're completely insane," she said, but there was warmth in her voice now. "So I've been told. Usually right before I do something that works out better than anyone expected." "This isn't some maintenance problem you can solve with the right tools, Jake. My people have expectations, rituals. There's a whole council that would need to approve any interspecies bonding, assuming they don't die of shock first." "What about what you want?" Jake asked. "I mean, setting aside armor opinions and councils and whatever, what do you actually want?" Keitha was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her hands. When she looked up, her expression was softer than he'd ever seen it. "I want to not be terrified of the answer to that question." Before Jake could respond, Commander Martinez's voice crackled over the intercom. "Sergeant Morrison, Warrior Keitha, report to Conference Room Alpha immediately." They looked at each other across the table. "Well," Jake said, standing up, "I guess it's time to find out if I've accidentally started an interstellar incident." "Or ended one," Keitha said quietly, rising to join him. As they walked toward the exit, Jake became aware of a low, harmonic humming sound. He glanced around, trying to locate the source, until he realized it was coming from the Zephyrian personnel. All of them, they were humming in perfect harmony, a sound both beautiful and slightly ominous. "What's that about?" he asked. "It's a traditional song," Keitha said, her ears flushing purple again. Roughly translated, it's called "The Armor Sings True." "Is that good or bad?" "Ask me after we survive the next hour." They walked toward Conference Room Alpha, accompanied by the sound of 30 voices raised in ancient harmony. While Jake wondered if his mother had ever had to deal with anything quite this complicated, when she was just trying to be neighborly. Conference Room Alpha had never felt smaller. Jake sat across from Commander Martinez, who was studying a data pad with the expression of someone trying to defuse a bomb, using instructions written in ancient Sanskrit. To her left, War Leader Thexan loomed like a particularly intimidating monument, his scarred features giving away nothing. Keitha occupied the chair beside Jake, sitting with military precision that couldn't quite hide her nervous energy. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," Martinez said finally, setting down the pad. "Sergeant Morrison performed routine maintenance on Allied equipment, and this has somehow resulted in what your people consider a marriage proposal." "Not a proposal," Thexan rumbled in his bass voice. "Recognition. The armor has spoken. In our culture, this is equivalent to your ancestors rising from the grave to personally endorse a union." Jake raised his hand tentatively. "Quick question about the ancestor thing. Are we talking metaphorically, or should I be worried about actual zombies?" Martinez closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. "Jake, please don't make this worse. I'm just trying to understand the parameters here. If we're dealing with supernatural elements, I'd like to know up front." "The ancestors remain properly deceased," Thexan said, and Jake could swear there was a hint of amusement in the alien's voice. "Though given your species' apparent ability to interface with our biotechnology, I begin to wonder if your people might have Zephyrian ancestry we know nothing about. Pretty sure my family tree is solid." "They want to know if Morrison represents a new development in human evolution," Thexan added, "or if this is some kind of elaborate cultural manipulation." "It's neither," Jake protested. "I just have really good tools and a compulsive need to fix things. Ask anyone who's served with me. I once spent 6 hours reorganizing the quartermaster's inventory by threat level and expiration date." "You did what to my inventory?" Martinez asked. "Made it alphabetical by function. Much more efficient, you should thank me." "We'll discuss that later. Right now, we need to figure out how to handle this situation without causing a diplomatic crisis." Thexan's communicator chimed with an incoming message. He listened to the rapid Zephyrian speech for several moments, his expression growing increasingly grave. When the message ended, he looked directly at Jake. "The Council of Matriarchs has rendered their preliminary judgment," he said. "They wish to observe Morrison's interaction with other pieces of Zephyrian biotechnology. If he shows the same compatibility, they will declare him the first human armor singer." "Armor singer?" Martinez asked. "One who can commune with living metal. It's a position of great honor among our people. Also great responsibility." Thexan paused, "and great danger should he prove unworthy." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Define great danger." "Ritual combat with our finest warriors, trial by crystal fire, meditation in the singing caves of Zephyr Prime, while the mountain spirits test your resolve." "Right, and if I politely decline this honor, then Keitha faces the consequences of having armor that responded to an outsider. She would be stripped of her rank and exiled as spiritually contaminated." The room went very quiet. Jake looked at Keitha, who was staring at her hands with the expression of someone watching her career evaporate in real time. "That's completely unfair," he said. "It's traditional," Thexan replied. "Though I admit we've never had to apply it to a situation quite like this one." "How long do we have to figure this out?" Martinez asked. Before Thexan could answer, the outpost's alarm system activated. Red lights bathed the conference room as Arya's voice filled the air. Alert! Multiple Vex bioships detected approaching the system. Estimated time to engagement: 4 hours 17 minutes. All personnel to battle stations. Perfect timing, Martinez muttered, standing. War leader, I need your people ready for combat operations. Jake, you're with me. We need every maintenance tech working on defensive systems. Actually, Thexan said, raising a massive hand, I would like Morrison to assist with preparing our equipment. If he truly has the gift, we'll need every advantage against the Vex. Jake looked between the two commanding officers. So to summarize, alien bugs are coming to kill us all. I might be some kind of mystical armor whisperer, and if I'm not, Keitha gets exiled. Did I miss anything? The part where you're taking this remarkably well, Keitha said. I grew up on a frontier colony. Weird stuff happens. You adapt or you die. He stood up. Where's this equipment you want me to look at? Thexan led them to the Zephyrian Armory, a chamber filled with racks of the living metal armor and weapons that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The moment Jake stepped inside, every piece of equipment in the room began to hum in harmony. Well, he said, looking around at the glowing arsenal, that's new. By the ancestors, Thexan breathed, I've never seen anything like it. Jake approached the nearest weapon rack. The moment his fingers touched the surface of a plasma rifle, it flared to life, its biodisplays activating and showing him system readouts he somehow understood despite never having seen them before. This targeting system is completely miscalibrated, he said absently, his hands already working on the weapon's internal mechanisms. And the power coupling is running about 15% below optimal. Who's been maintaining this stuff? Our finest technicians, Thexan said weakly. Well, they missed a few things. Jake moved to the next weapon, then the next, his movements becoming more fluid as the living metal seemed to guide his hands. This plasma conduit is partially blocked. This trigger mechanism has a microfracture. This power cell is storing a memory of the last 17 discharge cycles and compensating incorrectly. Within minutes, every weapon Jake touched was performing better than it had since leaving the factory. The armor pieces seemed to reach for him as he passed, eager for his attention. Okay, Jake said, stepping back and wiping his hands. That was deeply weird but oddly satisfying. How'd I do? Thexan was staring at him with something approaching religious awe. Morrison of Terra Nova, he said formally, I believe we have our answer. Is it a good answer or a bad answer? That, Keitha said, moving to stand beside him, depends entirely on whether you're ready to become the most important human in Zephyrian history. No pressure or anything, Jake muttered, then looked around at the glowing armory. Although I have to admit, this is way more interesting than fixing atmospheric processors. The Vex bioships looked like someone had crossed a wasp with a nightmare and given it the ability to travel through space. Jake watched them approach on the tactical display, their chitinous hulls gleaming with an oily iridescence that made his skin crawl. 15 minutes to contact, Arya announced. All defensive systems online. Jake stood in the command center wearing a piece of Zephyrian armor that had practically jumped off the rack when he'd walked past it. The biometal fitted him perfectly, responding to his movements like a second skin. More importantly, it was feeding him information about every other piece of Zephyrian equipment on the outpost through some kind of neural link he didn't understand, but had stopped questioning. Morrison, Commander Martinez said, what's the status on our combined defensive grid? Human plasma cannons are at full charge, Zephyrian crystal arrays are harmonized and ready, and I've managed to sync everything through the living metal network. Jake paused, processing the flood of data flowing through his armor's interface. Also, apparently I can now feel the emotional state of every Zephyrian weapon on this station, which is deeply weird but surprisingly useful. Emotional state, Martinez asked. They're excited. Apparently they really don't like Vex. Keitha, resplendent in her own gleaming armor, moved to stand beside him. The weapons remember every battle they've fought. Vex bioforms leave unpleasant impressions. Great, my rifle has PTSD. The first wave of Vex attackers struck the outer perimeter with the subtlety of a meteor impact. Through the armor's link, Jake felt the outpost's defenses respond as a coordinated whole for the first time in its operational history. Human engineering precision merged with Zephyrian biological intuition, creating something entirely new. Direct hit on Sector 7, someone reported. Vex boarding pods detected. Time to see if this Armorsinger thing comes with an instruction manual, Jake muttered, checking his borrowed weapon. The plasma rifle hummed contentedly in his hands, displaying tactical information directly into his visual cortex. The corridor outside the command center erupted into chaos as Vex warriors poured through the breached hull. Jake had seen them in intelligence reports, but facing them in person was entirely different. They moved like liquid death, all razor-sharp limbs and predatory intelligence. Left flank. Keitha shouted, her own weapon spinning up with a sound like angry wind chimes. Jake brought his rifle to bear and felt something extraordinary happen. Instead of just aiming and firing, he found himself connected to a network of every Zephyrian weapon in the corridor. He could sense their targets, their ammunition status, their optimal firing solutions. Without conscious thought, he began coordinating their attacks like a conductor leading an orchestra. "Morrison, what are you doing?" Martinez's voice crackled through his comm. "I have no idea, but it's working." The Vex advance faltered as the defenders' fire became unnaturally precise. Every shot found its mark, every movement was perfectly coordinated. Through the armor link, Jake felt the other Zephyrian warriors' amazement as their weapons performed beyond their usual capabilities. "The human conducts the metal song," one of them said in their musical language. "The ancestors smile." "The ancestors can smile later," Jake replied, surprising himself by understanding and responding in perfect Zephyrian. "Right now, we have bugs to squash." The battle raged through the outpost's corridors, but what should have been a desperate fighting retreat became something more like a deadly dance. Jake found himself at the center of it all, his armor translating tactical information between human and Zephyrian systems, his weapons network giving every defender supernatural accuracy. When the last Vex warrior fell, the sudden silence was almost deafening. "All clear," someone reported. "Vex bioships are retreating." Jake slumped against a bulkhead, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. The armor's neural link was fading, leaving him feeling oddly empty. "That," he said to Keitha, "was either the most terrifying or most exhilarating experience of my life. I haven't decided which." "Both," she said, removing her helmet. Her ears were flushed purple again, but this time with excitement rather than embarrassment. "You were magnificent. I was terrified and making it up as I went along. The best warriors usually are." War leader Thexan approached, moving with the careful gait of someone who'd taken a few hits during the fighting. "Morrison," he said, "the Council of Matriarchs has been monitoring our communications. They wish to speak with you." A holographic display flickered to life, showing three elderly Zephyrian females whose ears were adorned with intricate crystal jewelry. "Human Jake Morrison," the center figure said, "you have proven yourself in battle. The armor sings for you, the weapons dance at your touch, and our warriors fight better in your presence. We name you Armorsinger and grant you the right to bond with any warrior whose equipment accepts you." Jake looked at Keitha, who was trying very hard to appear nonchalant and failing completely. "Thank you for the honor," he said carefully, "but I should point out that I'm not really interested in bonding with multiple warriors. I'm more of a one-person kind of guy. The choice is yours, Armorsinger. Choose wisely." The hologram faded, leaving Jake facing Keitha in the corridor full of cooling Vex corpses and battle-damaged equipment. "So," he said, "hypothetically speaking, if someone were interested in this whole bonding thing, how would that work exactly?" There would be ceremonies, paperwork, a lot of very serious Zephyrians taking measurements and asking personal questions. Keitha stepped closer, but first there would be a simple question. Which is, will you have me, Jake Morrison of Terra Nova? Not because the armor says we're compatible, not because of politics or prophecies, but because you choose to. Jake looked at her, this brilliant, brave woman who could fight like a storm and laugh at his terrible jokes. Keitha Velthari of Zephyr Prime, he said formally, I would be honored to share my life with you. Fair warning, though, I'm going to keep fixing things compulsively, and I have it on good authority that I talk in my sleep. I snore when I'm really tired, and I have strong opinions about proper weapon maintenance that I will share whether you want to hear them or not. Perfect, we're clearly made for each other. Their kiss was interrupted by applause from the gathered human and Zephyrian personnel, who had apparently been eavesdropping shamelessly. All right, people, Commander Martinez said, let's give them some privacy and go repair this outpost. Again. As the crowd dispersed, Jake found himself alone with Keitha in the battle-scarred corridor. You know, he said, when I woke up this morning, I thought the biggest challenge I'd face was recalibrating the atmospheric processors. How do you feel about the change in plans? Jake considered this. 6 months ago, he'd been a simple maintenance tech with a compulsive need to fix things. Now, he was apparently some kind of mystical alien